5 years ago, in February of 2020, a pandemic swept the world. It started in China, made its way across the United States into Italy, throughout the European Union, and then eventually into the third world countries. And hundreds of thousands of people died from it. It created an atmosphere of people were told to stay at home and basically self-quarantine until we worked our way through it. Some unintended or some results were that the workforces of many companies stayed at home, and after the pandemic was taken care of about a year later, or brought under control, I guess would be better said, a lot of people continue to work at home. Another thing that changed dramatically as a result of the pandemic was education. I remember seeing a story in the Wall Street Journal, and in fact, I was able to find a copy of it. Will the pandemic revolutionize college admissions? They were just touching on the start of it. They were basically saying that a lot of the criteria that admission officers had used for students to be admitted to colleges was not available. They didn't finish out their school year. They couldn't take their normal PSAT and SAT tests. And so how were they going to decide which students were going to get into college, and particularly the prestigious colleges, who openly said they get twice as many applicants as they can handle, and every applicant could probably excel at the school if they could get admitted. Well, some other things started to come into play, that there were other inequities within the college education system. The first of those, I think, that a lot of people don't think of is the luck of the birth canal. If you're unlucky enough to be born of a mother in Somalia or Kenya or someplace in Africa or southern India, your opportunity to go to college is pretty limited. At least it had been. So, and that was just by luck of the birth canal. Then you step into the realm that back in 2000, it could cost as much as $74,000 a year to go to some of the prestigious colleges. And unless you were an alumni's descendant, or you were a superior athlete, again, your chances of getting into those universities were quite limited. So again, it was an equity that started to come to the surface. About the same time, in fact, the year before, there were a number of movie stars and corporate executives who it was found out were paying the college, bribing, in one case, a tennis pro at one of the outstanding universities, and getting the tennis professor or the tennis team to have their child be part of the team and thus gain entrance to the university when they didn't even play tennis. That even went to the rowing team in some universities. So again, the inequities of education started bubbling from a number of sources. And then it became aware or apparent that what really should determine whether you should go to an outstanding university should be your brain power, the ability that you have developed that brain, and then your work ethic. Were you willing to put in the work? And other technology and convergence came together, and it was decided that collectively between Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple, that maybe we should create a different kind of university system and build it out of artificial intelligence, big data, quantum computing, and artificial learning, machine learning, and then also virtual reality. And that virtual reality element of it brought in Facebook into the equation and their dealings with their company Oculus, which was the goggle company that the virtual reality and augmented reality company that they bought in, I believe it was 2014. So we created the University of the Cloud. And in essence, what it said is we recognize that under the old education system, you might have 70 people in a classroom, and you had one professor, and that professor had textbooks and resources, and he taught his method of teaching to all 70 people, who we recognize all 70 people have a different way of learning. And these tech companies said there has to be a better way by bringing these technologies together and then offering education to everyone, not just those who could afford it, not just those who, by luck of the birth canal, lived in a region or were related to the right people or whose parents could afford it. Let's make it available to everyone. And so now what has happened is that university occurs here. And it is directed at me. So, and it's not me, but to young people. So they put on their goggles, and which are connected to the internet, which are connected to the cloud. And whatever the subject matter is, it's delivered through these goggles. So if it's a textbook or it's a lecture, I either read it and hear it through these goggles. Now, what that changes is that rather than one professor teaching 70 people, one lecturer could be teaching 3 million people. That brings the cost down dramatically. It also increases the quality of the education. Let me give you an example. My grandson is in a class in the Cloud University, and he is taking a subject on entrepreneurship. One of his sessions is a 3-hour session with Jeff Bezos, where Jeff Bezos teaches that class. Now, under the old structure, would that have been possible? No. Jeff Bezos couldn't have traveled around and gone to 37 different universities and stood at a lectern and lectured those people. In this case, they produced his teaching, his lecture, and now it's available to anybody who signs up for that course. Well, what is the cost of the education now? Well, the entrance fee, which is the goggles, is $50. The class fee is $25. Now, again, let's compare that to a year at Harvard for $74,000. Because we have 3 million people in the class, the University of the Cloud doesn't need to charge $74,000 for their curriculum. And the young girl in Kenya who lives in a grass hut because of the unlock of the birth canal, who has a mind that is as good as the one from the daughter of a corporate executive who lives in San Francisco in a $7 million home and has all the privileges. The girl in Kenya is on equal ground. She has the same opportunity to become a lawyer, a neurosurgeon, because again, what has changed is in neurosurgery, a lot of what she has to learn is about robotics. She's on equal level with everybody else in that field. So her ability to adapt to that is she has as good a chance as someone who is more privileged. The other thing that I identify with tremendously, because I have a cognitive learning disability, is by use of this system, I see what the instructions are, and the system sees how I'm learning. So when I'm tested, the system recognizes where I scored good and where I scored poorly, and then goes back and watches how I learned where I scored good and how I learned where I scored poorly. And so now the curriculum is changed. So in other words, if I'm a visual learner as opposed to an audio learner, or if I respond more to video than I do the written or spoken word, my curriculum is changed through machine learning and artificial intelligence to teach the way I learn best. Now, what else has changed is now the decision of who is the best student is not made by the university. It is made by the employer. Because now, let's say that in my grandson's case, he's going into entrepreneurship and he wants to be hired by some startup company in the field that he's specializing in. They have all the information of how he learns and how he responds and what his strengths and weaknesses are on every realm, not only the subject, but social relation, working with others. That's all part of his profile that comes from the learning experience that the University of the Cloud can now supply them. Does this fill all the voids? No. What about the interrelation that is not available here, but was available at the University of Southern California? Well, we have developed programs because we can't, that there are activities similar to what, when I was growing up, was called the Peace Corps, where a student, to build that part of his profile, can participate in. So they go and work in countries and areas where they help people, they work with people, and they work as a team. And that is also scored as a part of their University of the Cloud experience. So that's how education has changed. And that's how it was really, what I think is interesting. It was a product of a bad situation. It was a consequence of the coronavirus. It was a consequence of unstabilizing the existing university system and re-examining it under new criteria. It was antiquated. Now, do they still exist? Yeah, they still exist for those people who want to be educated that way. But what we're finding out is the employers are warming up more towards the artificial intelligence, the universities that are using artificial intelligence and the big data as a teaching method. Because again, remember, in the university situation of the past, the knowledge base from which the education was coming was limited to the minds of the instructors. The knowledge base of the University of the Cloud is limited to the knowledge of the universe, because Google, Apple, Amazon, Google even has read every book and has it available. So all that knowledge is there, available to the student, where under the old system, the knowledge was limited to the professors and the teachers and the administrators that were available. So that's the education revolution. Allow me to step back into 2020. As an investor, you need to know this is coming. You need to look at what I just described to you, what I shared with you as to what education will be all about within probably 5 years. And you need to determine who's going to deliver this. Who's going to be the drivers and the providers of this kind of education? Because the kind of education we have is antiquated. It is supported by a system that knows it's going to be put out of business, but striving to stay alive. When you read an article like this that says the burden is now falling on the admissions director to decide who is going to get into the university and then have the ticket that they control to get to the big paying jobs, to get to the better lifestyle. That's wrong. It's antiquated. It doesn't have to be. And I'm here to tell you, it's doomed. And I, as an investor, recognize that. I know who the providers, who the big nine are, who has the data, who has the quantum computers. I know, as of today, who could make this system happen. What I don't know is who's going to put it together. Who's the startup that's going to be probably bought not by Apple or Google or Amazon or IBM or Microsoft or Facebook, but who's going to be financed by all of them and say, collectively, we can make this happen. And so let's put our petty jealousies and our profit motive to the side and make the world a better place. Because I think one of the other unintended consequences of the coronavirus is we need to make this place, this world, a better place. So that young lady in Kenya can get the education that she deserves and have the life that she deserves. So our job is to help these companies by sharing our money with them and then sharing in their growth.